Hey, what's up guys, it's Jonathan here. Like many millennials like myself are struggling to pay off huge amounts of student loans. Given that this is probably one of the biggest financial burdens that our generation has to deal with, I thought for the sake of not only being transparent, but also providing value to you guys, my plan is to pay off about $30,000 worth of student loans. So in this video, we're going to discuss how I got into this debt and my plan to pay it off and why I chose this specific plan. So if any of this brings you value, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. They both greatly help out the channel. And let's get right into it. So obviously for me to get into debt, I did have to go to school. So for me, I went to a 4-year university directly out of high school. And for me, I went to a private university, which is definitely a lot more pricier than like your public universities, like for example, like Ohio State's or Texas A&M's or schools like that. But even though I did go to private school, I did get some scholarship and grant money. I didn't have to pay the full price of my tuition. I believe when I was going to school, my school was about $50,000 for room and board every year, which was already pretty expensive. But then on top of it as well, because I went to school for engineering, I did have to pay differentials. And I know if you went to school for something like history or art, you may not be familiar with differentials. But basically what they are is that you pay your normal tuition fee. Let's just say that's $10,000 a semester. And then on top of it, they charge you differentials for like the technology or the equipment that you may use in a course. Pretty much from my experience when I was in school, almost all of my engineering courses had differentials because we were either using advanced computer software or we had labs or things of that nature. And the cost of differentials kind of varied, but in my experience, they're anywhere from like a couple $100 a credit all the way up to a couple $1,000 a credit. That definitely helped blow up my student loan bill. Back when I was in college, I wasn't as financially knowledgeable as I was now. So what I did is that pretty much every time they offered the government student loans to me, I pretty much took out the max amount. I don't really know why I did this. It kind of wasn't the smartest thing to do. But for me, I wasn't smart enough to know okay, let me get this money and go put it in the stock market. I actually got that money, I put it in a savings account. Luckily back then, savings accounts paid more than they do now. I think I went to school in the mid 2010s, so like 2014, 15, that time. Yeah, so that money was just sitting in a savings account, but even though the interest I was paying on the loan was much higher than the interest the bank was paying me. The way I saw it is that it was money that I could use just in case something happened. I was pretty much taking out a loan as an emergency fund, which I don't necessarily recommend, but it was just that at that time I didn't know any better. So this is a snapshot I just took today on all my student loan balances. So the current balance that I own is about $27,712.71. Now, when I was in school, I remember that first semester of my freshman year, I did pay off maybe like a couple $1,000s worth of the loan, and then I stopped paying them off. And I think that also goes back to what I was saying earlier, how I wanted to use the money as like an emergency fund per se. That's basically what happened. As you can see here, all of the loans right now are currently at 0%. That's just because of the forbearance. Obviously, once that ends, they'll go back to their regular interest rates. I believe my average interest rate between all of them was about somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.8, 4.2, something like that. So it was about 4% or so. Yeah, I took out both the subsidized and unsubsidized loans each of the 4 years I was in school. And for me, I would just take out the max amount every year and not even really try to pay it back or anything. Which later on in this video, I'll actually tell you why that was such a good move. But at the time, I didn't understand how good of a move it would have been. So I know typically when you watch YouTube videos talking about paying off student loans, most people are usually talking about how they're trying to pay off student loans as soon as possible and how they're throwing every dime that they make into paying off these loans. Well, my situation's a little bit different, but if you stay till the end of this video, I will go into in-depth why I did this. But basically, I've been out of school, I think, for about 3 years now, and I've actually saved up enough money where I could just pay off my student loans in one chunk. An example of this is one of my investment accounts that I have here. And it's obviously the balance of it's around $28,000. And you might be thinking, why don't you just sell all of your positions that you have in this investment account and pay off your student loans? That would be the right financial move, correct? Well, for most people it would be. For most people it would be the right thing for them to do in their situation. But for me, I don't necessarily believe that this is the right thing to do in my situation. And by the title of this investment account, you could probably already tell where I'm going with this. But if not, let me tell you 4 reasons why I'm actually not in a hurry to pay off this debt. So the first reason why I don't want to pay off this debt quickly is because it's actually more risky for me to pay it off faster than for me to pay it off slower. Here's the thing. So all of my student loans are government-sponsored loans. They're all from the U.S. Department of Education. And one of the nice things the U.S. Department of Education allows you to do is to put your loans into forbearance. Even outside of the pandemic, they offer that service as well. And for you to qualify for this forbearance, all you had to do was to prove that you had some kind of hardship, usually like a job loss or something like that. You can end up having your student loans in forbearance while you look for a new job. For me, I see this as almost another emergency fund per se, because it's one more bill I don't have to worry about paying for in the case I lost my income sources or something of that nature. So it would actually be more risky for me to pull that money out of that account and for me to pay off those loans than it would be for me just to pay those loans off slowly. I know a big question that might come up is, aren't you paying 4% interest on your student loans? And indeed I am. But one of the great things about loaning money in general is that you have this thing called the time value of money. When I was in school, one of the things they taught us was that a near dollar is more valuable than a far away dollar. It's a weird concept to think about, but I think that the best way to think about it is, what do you think is going to be more valuable? A dollar in 2021 or a dollar in 2031? Most likely it's going to be the dollar in 2021 that's going to be more valuable. Even though in 2021 we've had this crazy spike in inflation, typically we do have inflation, but it's very mild. Basically what inflation does is that it devalues dollars. When you're paying down debt over time, it becomes easier for you to pay down debt as the value of each dollar becomes less. That means that now the value of $40 10 years ago is going to be a lot more than the value of $10 in the future. And this is all just based on inflation. So given that I have that money in that investment account invested, I'm probably going to earn somewhere between 6 to 10% every year. Whereas the interest on my student loans is about 4%, which means that even if I keep my money in the stock market and then I go pay the interest on the student loans, I would probably net anywhere from about 2 to 4%. And then another thing about this situation is that if I was to sell all my investments, I would have to pay taxes on the gains of those investments, which could be a pretty hefty bill. Another thing with taxes as well is that with student loan interest, your interest payments are actually a tax write-off. Let's just say, for example, your top tax rate is 33%, and you have student loans that are at 3% interest. If you consider the fact that you can write that off against your taxes, effectively you actually have a 2% interest rate, not a 3% interest rate. So it actually doesn't make sense for you to pay off your student loans quickly. Then the fourth reason why I'm not in a hurry to pay off my loans is because of public student loan forgiveness. Anytime you take out student loans from the government, if you were to work in a either public sector or nonprofit company, if you work there for 10 years, after you make about 60 payments, you have the ability to write off the remaining part of your loan balance. And for me, I've definitely heard the stories of people not qualifying for it or it being a really hard struggle to get it. So I'm not necessarily banking on this so much, but I've done the numbers out and I believe that even in a situation where I would still have a remaining balance after 10 years, even if it wasn't forgiven, it wouldn't devastate me financially. So I'm much willing to just weigh it out and take out the risk. And like I said before with the time value of money, paying $4,000 10 years from now is a lot easier than trying to pay $4,000 today. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well. Basically, what my plan is when it comes to paying off student loans. So for me, the first 6 months that I got out of school, I didn't pay a dime towards my student loans. And I used the entirety of that grace period to just save money and invest it. And once I started making payments, I actually applied for one of the income adjusted payment programs. I think they're called IDRs, income driven repayments or something like that. If you know what that stands for, let me know in the comment section down below, because I'm pretty sure I got that wrong. Basically what that is when they adjust your payment based on how much money you're making. I actually adjusted it to the lowest payment possible. And every year you have to re-qualify for these payment programs. So every year I'll just readjust to the lowest possible payment I can make. And my plan is to continue to keep doing this until I've paid off the balance in full. But for me, I'm not worried about paying off these loans as soon as possible. So some key takeaways from this is that this kind of thinking drives how I pay off other things as well. Like for example, I have a car loan and my car loan has a lower interest rate than my student loans. And for me, I'm not in a rush to pay off that loan either and that goes back to what I said about the time value of money. It's easier to pay off debt as the value of the dollar becomes less and less over time. That also leads me to saying that when you're younger, your money is more valuable than when you're older. And this is why it's so important for you to start saving and investing when you're young, because that will pay off in the long run versus you waiting until you're in your 30s or 40s or something like that. But that's a topic for a whole nother video. Another key takeaway that's worth mentioning is that the way I'm going about this is definitely the more risky way to do it. It's always less riskier for you to go ahead and pay off your debt. But given what I want to do in my finances, it doesn't necessarily make sense in my situation to go ahead and do that. So I'd like to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button for YouTube algorithm. It greatly helps out the channel, helps push this video out to as many people as possible. If you enjoy my perspectives or the way I explain things, consider hitting the subscribe button and notification bell so you get notified every time I post a new video. What do you guys think about this strategy of paying off debt? Do you think it's a wise one or not? Let me know in the comment section down below. I would love to hear from you guys. Also, check out all my social medias. I try to post there every day. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.